Hello, and we're live. Just wanted to show off my Lemon Gate show here, shirt here. So today we're going to be talking about the Kingsmoot and the elect snow. Um, just wanted to make sure that this thing's going, so I had it playing on YouTube as well. I've paused it now. Anyway, um, so the Kingsmoot and the election of Jon Snow. So Westerosi democracy on in A Song of Ice and Fire, and of course, this is all metaphor, so beware. So we're brought into the um, concept of a Kingsmoot from Aaron, and then I believe we get an Asha chapter, and then we get a Victarion chapter, and then we get another Aaron chapter when they actually do the Kingsmoot. And what I want to do here is critique it a little bit. So we know the outcome of that Kingsmoot is Euron winning, right? But we also know that he pretty much lies the entire time he's actually speaking at the Kingsmoot. So what does Euron promise? Let me find my tab here where I have that. So he promises all sorts of things. He promises to give all of Westeros. He promises that he's going to marry Daenerys Targaryen, someone who doesn't even know he exists. He promises that he's going to conquer the entire world, just for everyone, and it's only because he knows in his culture that's what they want. They want plunder. And so nothing, but the thing is, nothing about what this guy is actually promising is real. They're not. Yes, okay, sure. They took the Shield Islands, and they took some islands over down by the Arbor, and maybe they might even have a good enough of a plan to take Old Town. But beyond that, all they're going to do is cause trouble. They're not going to actually accomplish any of the things that he promised. The things he promises are only because he wants those captains in this democracy to vote for him. He doesn't want anything else. And, we have a couple other candidates at the Kingsmoot. I'm a big fan of the of Eric Ironmaker and what Asha does to put him down. But then, of course, she's punished by Euron later by being married in absentia to him. So yeah, it's kind of fun. Sorry, I'm gonna have to look this up the old-fashioned way because I just lost that tab. So yes, so Asha goes and be calls out Eric Ironmaker's lies, and she calls out Victarion's lies. But for some reason, she's not able to interrupt Aaron or interrupt Euron and do the same thing to fact check it. And that's part of the reason that he's able to win. Also, obviously, if we're getting into the Song of Ice and Fire side of it, we're talking about a magic here. So that Dragonbinder horn is a magic horn. It did something to the audience that heard it. We don't know whether it lets their guard down, literally enthralls them, or exactly what the mechanism is, but it wasn't just a loud sound to startle them. It was magic. So yeah, Crow's Eye says, Euron Crow's Eye says, my little brother would finish Balon's war and claim the north. My sweet niece would give us peace and pine cones. His lips twisted in a smile. Asha prefers victory to defeat. Victarion wants a kingdom, not a few scant yards of earth. From me, you shall have both. Crow's Eye, you call me. Well, who has a keener eye than a crow? After every battle, the crows come in their hundreds and their thousands to feast upon the fallen. A crow can espy death from afar, and I say that all of Westeros is dying. Those who follow me will feast until the end of their days. So he's calling out and saying, yeah, we're gonna steal, we're gonna break others down, we're gonna take from them, we're gonna be takers, right? Something that in politics is generally looked on as bad, but for some reason with certain people like Euron, people think, oh well, if you're not taking, you're not winning. You're a loser, right? So that's the type of mentality that Euron is taking advantage of here. He says, those who follow me will feast until the end of their days. We are the Ironborn, and once we were conquerors. Our writ ran everywhere the sound of waves was heard. My brother would have you content with the cold and dismal north, my niece with even less. But I shall give you Lannisport, High Garden, the Arbor, Old Town, the Riverlands and the Reach, the Kingswood and the Rainwood, Dorne and the Marches, the Mountains of the Moon and the Vale of Arryn, Tarth and the Stepstones. I say we take it all. I say we take Westeros. He glanced at the priest. All for the greater glory of the drowned god, to be sure. Now that is pretty obviously not actually what he wants. He could care less about Aeron's god, and the fact that Aeron and people who profess to be godly don't even have the strength to beat that spell, and don't even have the strength to say no to a man who is clearly has absolutely nothing to do with what you might consider the positive aspects of any kind of religion. So the fact that Aeron and his cohort are not even strong enough to shake off this spell, and it shows that their religion, this evangelical drowned god worship, is so hollow, right? There is nothing about Euron that is godly, right? There's nothing about this candidate that is godly, and yet somehow people find themselves voting for him because he says things like this that sound a little godly, but they ring so hollow when you actually look into his actions. Right, there is nothing godly about this character. And then he goes on, and that's and that's kind of what happens next is in the quote. So Euron stopped talking, and this is of course Aeron's point of view, the drowned man. For half a heartbeat, even Aeron was swept away with the boldness of his words. The priest had dreamed the same dream. When first he'd seen the red comet in the sky, we shall sweep over the green lands with fire and sword. out of the 7 gods and of the Septons, root out the 7 gods of the Septons and the white trees of the Northmen. So we're talking about a crusade here in his mind. But again, not a godly crusade, just a crusade in the name of God, in the name of the drowned God. But nothing actually godly about this. And so Aaron's religion, I think one of the things George R. R. Martin is trying to say to us here is completely hollow. It is empty. It is words in order to maintain power. And so Aaron is what we call a sycophant. He's a cult member. He's not actually a religious figure. Religions claim to be for positive, but this is not. So the face George R. R. Martin is putting on this religion is purposefully very violent, very totalitarian, I guess you might say. And then so Asha, like I said earlier, Asha tries to speak up, and so she goes ahead and says, "Crow's eye," Asha called. "Did you leave your wits at a shy? If we so she wasn't. Let's remember. Now we talked about the horn being a spell and something to get people to agree, to stun them or whatever it is. But Asha does not take it. So something about her fortitude, her mental fortitude, or maybe her magical abilities allows her to shirk off the effects of this horn. So she says, "Crow's eye," Asha called. "Did you leave your wits at a shy? If we cannot hold the north, and we cannot, how can we win the whole of the 7 kingdoms? Why, it has been done before. Did Balon teach his little girl so little in the ways of war? Victarion, our brother's daughter, has never heard of Aegon the Conqueror. It would seem," and Asha again goes on to interrupt him. "Aegon," Victarion crossed his arms. Now Victarion speaks up. "Aegon." Victarion crossed his arms against his armored chest. "What has the Conqueror to do with us?" "I know as much as war as you do, Crow's Eye," Asha said. "Aegon Targaryen conquered Westeros with dragons." So we're talking about militarization here now. And that's something we talk about with might wins right, and that's typical of politics many places around the world. Hopefully not here where I'm sitting tomorrow. And so so Euron responds, "And so shall we," Euron Greyjoy promised. "That horn you heard I found amongst the smoking ruins that were Valyria, where no man has dared to walk but me." Again, a lie. I don't believe that he actually went there. I think he got it he stole it from some ship or something like that. I don't actually believe he went to Valyria, similar to his Valyrian steel suit of arms. Okay. "You heard its call and felt its power. It is a dragon horn, bound with bands of red gold and Valyrian steel, graven with enchantments." I definitely believe that it's a magical horn. "The dragon lords of old sounded such horns before the doom devoured them. With this horn, Iron Men, I can bind dragons to my will." What he's leaving out is that right now with this horn, he's actually binding them to his will. He's not actually saying things that make sense or would make sense if they were in their right minds, which clearly Asha is. And Victarion, actually, to his credit, seems to be pushing back as well. Asha laughed aloud. "A horn to bind goats to your will would be of more use, Crow's Eye. There are no more dragons." Of course, Asha is wrong about that, and so Euron does come in at an advantage there. "Again, girl, you are wrong. There are 3, and I know where to find them. He may know where to find them. He's not going to be successful at actually using them, but that's neither here nor there. You run! Shouted the left-handed Lucas Cod. Okay, so this is where the other bureaucrats that are already in Euron's thrall that have been bought off the Cods because they're poor, and so he's swayed them in that old style with corruption, right? So corruption is one of the tools of Euron Greyjoy. Lies are one of the tools of Euron Greyjoy. Violence is one of the tools of Euron Greyjoy. Speaking to wants and the gripes of the people who are poor, yet knowing that he won't actually do anything for them. He just wants to use them as tools. He thinks that they're losers, right? He thinks that they're dupes, that he can just dupe them into his war, his evil war, but he doesn't actually care about them. He's just using them, right? So that's what Euron Greyjoy is. So that's where I think kind of the end of the scene. The rest of it is just everyone who has been fallen under the thrall of the Kingsmoot in his words afterwards, or were bought off in a corrupt way before that, right? Of course, that corruption is part of this Kingsmoot. It was not hidden; it was out in the open. Something that isn't surprising, I guess, given what we know about the world today. Let's just remember this is metaphor, okay? We're using the Kingsmoot as allegory for what can happen in the real world. If George R. R. Martin were not writing about real things, if he did not actually have themes, the theme of peace, of war being bad, for instance, there's really no reason to read it, because it's just a hollow story at that point. The themes are in the way it tugs on human emotion are the ways a story actually pulls you in and holds you and makes it bigger than just words on a page. You can make up a story and it has no theme and it means nothing, and I guarantee you it's not going to take off. It's not going to mean anything. It's not going to go anywhere, right? So that's that. Yeah. So then the mutes and the so it goes on. The mutes and the mongrels from the silence threw open Euron's chest and spilled out his gifts before the captains and kings. Again, bribery, plain and simple, straight out there. Spilled out the gifts before the captains and kings. Then it was Hotho Harlaw, the priest heard, as he filled his hands with golds. Gorold Goodbrother shouted out as well, and Eric Anvilbranker, Euron, Euron, Euron. So those were some of the previous candidates who had spoken. Notice that the fellow from the Lonely Light, he did not join in, because he of course is magical and was able to probably shirk it too. But he saw the writing on the wall. He knew he wasn't going to win based on his own reception. But I love that character. What is his name's? Anyway, so those guys all just fall in. So basically, that's the end of it. But the next paragraph is useful. Let's say, even a priest may doubt, even a prophet may know terror. Aaron Damphair reached within himself for his God and discovered only silence. As 1,000 voices shouted out his brother's name, all he could hear was the scream of a rusted iron hinge. Now, the rusted iron hinge, I think, is a metaphor for something that happens either later or earlier in his life. But the fact that George R. R. Martin, at the end of this chapter, has Euron try to reach in for his god and find nothing is telling. I mean, that's part of the reason I believe what I believe, which is that the drowned god doesn't actually exist. That it's a figment of his imagination. He's a crazy. He calls himself a prophet, but he's actually just insane and on a power trip. He thinks, he for some reason has blamed, is unhappy with himself and what he was before his accident, and somehow after that he comes out and is um, this prophet, but it's all within his own mind. At least that's my take on the thing. I think that Aaron's uh, point of view is a way to illustrate the emptiness of certain religions that don't actually have tenets that bind people to doing actual good. So that's that. What was it? Crazy Eyes. I can't remember that first guy who spoke at the Kingsmoot. Mad Eyes, not yeah. His eye. So this is Gilbert Farwind. Lord Gilbert began to speak. He told of a wondrous land beyond the sunset sea, a land without winter or want, where death had no dominion. Make me your king, and I shall lead you there, he cried. We will build 10,000 ships, as Nymeria once did, and take sail with all our people to the land beyond the sunset. There every man shall be a king, and every wife a queen. So I think George R. R. Martin is taking Gilbert Farwind and obviously making him out to be a little insane, but a little insane not on the authoritarian right where Euron Greyjoy is, but making it. He's talking about a utopia here, a utopia. It seems like I would say more on the left, maybe a communist utopia. Um, you know, there every man shall be a king and every wife a queen. It's making it sound like that. Of course, that can't happen, right? I mean, resource scarcity tells you that some will have and some will have not. So the idea that every man will live as a king and queen is it's poking at the fact that both sides, far extremes, are not real, right? What they promise are not real. So it goes on, and then this is the thing I wanted to talk about, and I kind of like there. This is still in the Drowned Man toward the beginning. His eyes, Aaron saw, were now gray, now blue, as changeable as the seas. Mad eyes, he thought, fool's eyes. The vision he speaks of was doubtless a snare set by the storm god to lure the Ironborn to destruction. The offerings that his men spilled out. Now we don't need to go with the rest of it, but it, it's Aaron's. Other than the religious twist he puts on it, he actually does see through this pretty well. But I like that Mad Eyes. His eyes being now gray, now blue, as changeable as the seas. Mad eyes, he thought. Fool's eyes. I don't know about mad or fools, but Gilbert Farwind clearly has some of that the eyes that come from the Great Empire of the Dawn. So magical eyes. So I think the fact that he doesn't speak later in favor of Euron shows that he actually is within his own faculties, as weird as he may be and as off base as his political ambitions are compared to the rest of his society. He was actually he was actually able to fight off the effects of that horn and to not fall into the trap of listening to the rantings of a lunatic. So he was smart from that standpoint. So yeah. So I want to switch now to talk about Asha. Asha is you know so we'll start where Victorians is another candidate, but he represents, let's call him the status quo, right? So he represents no change. He's basically just the machine of war continuing as it is uh, with no change, nothing going forward. So I find that him. So let's talk about let's finish his with what he says. With that, his champions began to shout, "Victorian, Victorian, Victorian King!" Actually, let's go to the paragraph before that. When Victorian rose, his champions arrayed themselves beneath him. Ralph the Limper, Red Ralph Stonehouse, Newt the Barber, noted warriors all. Stonehouse bore the Greyjoy banner, the golden kraken on a field as black as the midnight sea. As soon as it unfurled, the captains and the kings began to shout out the Lord Captain's name. Victoria waited till they quieted, then said, "You all know me. If you want sweet words, look elsewhere. I have no singer's tongue. I have an axe, and I have these." He raised his huge, mauled hands up to show them, and Newt the Barber displayed his axe, a fearsome piece of steel. "I was a loyal brother," Victorian went on. "When Balon was wed, it was me he sent to Harlaw to bring him back his bride. I led his longships into many a battle, and never lost but one. The first time Balon took a crown, it was me sailed into Lannisport to singe the lion's tail. The second time, it was me he sent to skin the young wolf should he come howling home. All you'll get from me is more of what you got from Balon. That's all I have to say." Now, what they got from Balon again was defeat. so, doing the same thing over and over again. I think the lesson of Victorian's message is that doing the same thing over and over again is mad. It's madness, right? So if you expect the same result, you don't do that. So that's you know so that from that standpoint, I can understand um uh people being concerned about what we're seeing today, and thinking that somehow protesting against the choices you have is a good thing. Um, but actually, that's been done before. It's been done in the Vietnam era. It was done in the at the turn of the century. It was done while we still had two active wars in this world. It didn't work. So doing that again, to me, knocking your head against the wall uh, like that is not change. It will accomplish nothing. So that's all I have to say about that. Victorian is the status quo, and protest votes, against other candidates who actually had a shot. Um, because Victorian, he talked to Asha, and she tried to work together with him, and if two sides that could have made common cause and done something positive had combined, maybe this Kingsmoot would be different. But taking a vote away from someone where it could have gone and splitting that vote in a way that doesn't make sense can have an effect of getting you the worst candidate compared to what you and other potential allies would want. So I just can't see any sense in doing that. Um, so when that's the one thing I just can't get, and I hope it doesn't affect us in the way it you know I hope it doesn't affect Westeros in the way. I hope the effects of Euron having gotten actually um, elected don't come to a fruition as badly as they could. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So Victarion. So they all yell with that. His champions began to chant, "Victarion, Victarion, Victarion, King!" Below, his men were spilling out his chests, a cascade of silver, gold, gems. Again, the corruption is obvious metaphor. Captains scrambled to seize the richest pieces, shouting as they did, "Victarion, Victarion, Victarion King!" Now remember, it's captains. So this isn't true democracy. This is something a democratized ritual, but it's not like everybody gets to vote. That's democracy. In this case, only captains get to vote. So we're talking about elitists in one sense or another. Now, obviously, a lot of captains are pretty rough folks. So I'm not saying that they're all like nobility and that only the nobility gets to vote, as it was up until until the House of Commons was in historical society. But it's not true democracy. So we got to think about that. And the way people who consider themselves elites try to hold on to power is by getting us, again, making us think that our vote isn't important. Our votes are important. So the fact that if all the folks who listen to these captions rose up against them in mutiny, you could have a completely different set of leaders out there. So that was that's just one other thing to show that there's something that's not quite right about this democratic process here on the page for coming from our author. So captains scrambled to seize the richest pieces, shouting as they did, "Victarion, Victarion, Victarion King!" Aeron watched the crow's eye. Will he speak now or let the Kingsmoot run its course? Orkwood of Orkmont was whispering in Euron's ear. So, then we do have Asha come in, and there is some vote splitting that goes on, right? It's not as ideal as we'd like it to be. If they had presented a united front with Euron there, or with Victarion in front or Asha in front, she had the better claim, right? It might have gone differently, but you have people that claim to be on the same side of politics, and for victory, right? And you can't see your way through. Now, and the reason it doesn't work in this case is, we know from the prior chapter, the Victarion, it's his misogyny that is the reason that he can't go with Asha. So that's a pretty straightforward type of issue. It's almost like like George R. R. Martin was looking ahead to seeing the types of things that might happen in the world, right? He obviously published A Feast for Crows in 2006. So there's nothing about current events in what he wrote, but there's predictivity of current events, and talking about things that caused women not to be leaders, right? So Victarion's direct and straightforward misogyny against Asha uh, is is a big part of why they couldn't get together. And yet, the realm and the Iron Islands are worse for it. So, it goes on. But it was not Euron who put an end to the shouting. It was the woman. She put two fingers in her mouth and whistled. A sharp, shrill sound that cut through the tumult like a knife through curds. Nuncle, nuncle. Bending, she snatched up a twisting golden collar and bounded up the steps. Newt seized her by the arm, and for half a heartbeat, Aeron was hopeful that his brother's champions would keep her silent. Okay, so I didn't say it wasn't just it wasn't just Victarion that has the misogyny. Aeron wants to silence the woman too. It was the woman. He doesn't even think of her with her name. It was the woman. We're talking about his niece. We're talking about somebody who's been around his brother, who he's talked about as being the king, the guy that couldn't possibly understand how he could die in the chapter when he decided there was going to be a Kingsmoot. His Balon, this king, this godly king that he looked up to. We're talking about his daughter, Balon's daughter, and he can't even think her name. It was the woman. I mean, we're talking about and that's another aspect of religion I guess I should focus on. We're talking about religions that claim to be for protection of women, but all these protections they put on women, it always seems like they're actually oppressions, not protections. Maybe they're just really bad spellers. I mean, there's P's in both those words. I don't know. I don't get it. So but Aeron, he shows his true colors. He hopes that Newt is able to actually keep her silent. In quote, keep her silent. But Asha, okay, finally he mentions her name halfway through the paragraph. But Asha wrenched free of the barber's hand and said something to Red Ralph that made him step aside. As she pushed past, the cheering died away. She was Balon Greyjoy's daughter, and the crowd was curious to hear her speak. So the crowd they were open, right? Not everyone was misogynistic here, but these elites, Victarion and Aeron, they were, right? It's pretty sad, and obviously Newt is fits the bill there too. But even Ralph just he steps aside, right? So yeah, we're talking about the real issues here, exactly. This is metaphor squozy shop. Okay. Good to see you here. So yeah. So, but Asha wrenched free of the barber's hand and said something to Red Ralph that made him step aside. As she pushed past, the cheering died away. So she was Balon Greyjoy's daughter, and the crowd was curious to hear her speak. It was good of you to bring gifts to my Kingsmoot. It was good of you to bring such gifts to my Queensmoot, Nuncle, she told Victarion. But you need not have worn so much armor. I promise not to hurt you. So the fact that he came all ready for war shows the violence of his intentions, right? And so she calls him out, and I like that. I promise not to hurt you. This should be a peaceful event, right? They talk though about at the end of it that Ashwa does flee for her life to make sure that Euron doesn't try to assassinate her as one of the losers. So, of course, that's something Euron Greyjoy would do, right? Is take his political enemies and punish them, right? It's one thing to punish someone for actual crimes. It's another thing to just punish them because they're on your bad list. So Asha goes on. There's no one braver than my nuncle, no one stronger, no one fiercer in a fight, and he can count to 10 as quick as any man. I have seen him do it. When he needs to go to 20, he does take off his boots. That made them laugh. I like that one. That's a good one. He has no sons, though. His wives keep dying. The Crow's Eye is his elder and has a better claim. So that's true. So she's kind of a little bitter here, though. She did not need to tear into Victarion the way she did. She's bitter at him not choosing to ally with them. At you know logical and a logical allyship being thwarted by his stupidity, his brutishness, his misogyny, right? So she is bitter, and it comes through, and she didn't need to do that, and that might not have helped her. Uh, Helped her, and so let's move on here. Sorry, I'm doing this all on a search device and Fire. I'm not. I don't actually have a cut and paste document built together to make this happen. So you have to bear with me as I get to the next one. So, but my claim is better still. Asha set the collar on her head at a jaunty angle. So the gold gleamed against her dark hair. Balin's brother cannot come before Balin's son. So she knows of the misogyny, and she tries to make the claim that, or try to head it off and say, you know, they're going to want Balin's son. Obviously, we know Balin's son is out there, but for most of them, they probably assume he's gone or never going to come back. So Asha makes the claim for herself as Balin's son, and tries to make the point that she's the same. Now, obviously, I'm against the idea of inheritance. I think that the leader should be the elected person who the masses do elect, right? I do think that we have not been getting good information to people in the primaries, and I think that should improve, right? But anyway, I think so I don't really care much about her claim, but I do like that she's trying to combat the misogyny by putting herself in the light of being Balin's son instead of Balin's daughter. He said, okay, but then Ralph the Limper, Balin's sons are dead. All I see is Balin's little daughter. So he's minimizing her, calling her his little daughter. Of course, she forgets that. She skips that part, and she says, "Daughter." Asha slipped a hand beneath her jerkin. "Oh ho! What's this? Shall I show you? Some of you have not seen one since they weaned you." They laughed again. "Teats on a king are a terrible thing. Is that the song? Ralph, you have me. I am a woman." Though not the old woman, not an old woman like you. Okay, so set in his ways, pushing at people who are set in their ways. I like that. Ralph the Limper, shouldn't that be Ralph the Limp? Again, she's trying to play to the crowd. I don't mind that, although her targets are people that are actually respected, so it's kind of tough the needle she's trying to thread here. Asha drew a dirk from between her breasts. "I'm a mother too, and here's my suckling babe." She held it up. "And here, my champions." They pushed past Victorian's 3 to stand below her. Carl the Maid, Christopher Botley, and the knight Sir Harris Harlaw, whose sword Nightfall was as storied as Dunstan Drum's Red Rain. My nuncle said, "You know him. You know me too." I want to know you better," someone shouted. Yeah, of course. Again, he has to bring it back because that's kind of part of the point of this whole scene. They dismiss her, and I see this, and it really bothers me. Mispronouncing people's names, forgetting people's names. So it shows a lack of respect, right? So anyway, so Asha goes on. "Go home and know your wife," Asha shot back. "Nuncle says he'll give you more of what my father gave you." Well, what was that? We look at war and war and war and losing wars, or even if you're winning wars, what are you getting out of it? Maybe elites are getting something out of it. Maybe elites are getting plunder out of it, but regular people are just getting killed out of it. So that's what war is, right? So she says, "Well, what was that? Gold and glory, some will say. Freedom, ever sweet. Aye, it's so. He gave us that. Widows, too. As Lord Blacktide will tell you. How many of you had your homes put to the torch when Robert came? How many had daughters raped and despoiled, burnt towns and broken castles? My father gave you that. Defeat was what he gave you. Nuncle here will give you more. Not me. What will you give us? Said Lucas Codd. Knitting? Again, misogynistic trope. Woman, all she can do is knit and stay in the kitchen, right? And so, it's more of the same, right? That's another metaphor for more of the same. I, Lucas, I'll knit us a kingdom. I'll knit us all a kingdom. She tossed her dirk from hand to hand. We'll need to take a lesson from the young wolf who won every battle and lost all. A wolf is not a kraken, Victorian objected. What the kraken grasps, it does not lose, be it longship or leviathan. And what have we grasped, Nuncle? The north? What is that but leagues and leagues of leagues and leagues, far from the sound of the sea? We have taken Moat Cailin, Deepwood Mott, Torrens Square, even Winterfell. What do we have to show for it? She beckoned, and her black winged men pushed forward, chests of oak and iron on their shoulders. I give you the wealth of the stony shore, Asha said, as the first was upended. An avalanche of pebbles clattered forth, cascading down the steps, pebbles gray and white and black, worn smooth by the sea. I give you the riches of Deepwood, she said, as the second chest was opened. Pine cones came pouring out to roll and bounce down into the crowd. And last, the gold of Winterfell. From the third chest came yellow turnips, round and hard and big as a man's hand. They landed amidst the pebbles and pine cones. Asha stabbed one with her dirk. Harmund Sharp, she shouted. Your son Harag died at Winterfell for this. She pulled the turnip off her blade and tossed it to him. You have other sons, I think. If you'd trade their lives for more turnips. Shout my nuncle's name. The whole nuncle thing is kind of weird. I wish he wouldn't do that. Yeah. Mine nuncle, I think is what they're doing, taking the N at the end of my and making it sound like uncle and then adding it over there linguistically, but it's kind of stupid. So, yeah, anyway. So he responds, and if I shout your name, Harmon demanded, what then? Peace, said Asha. And this is actually, if we're talking about this as a democratic process, that's the best thing that Asha stands for. It's not the fact that she's a woman that people should vote for her. It's because, given her worldviews and given her experiences, she's the most likely to find a way to avoid war, right? So peace, said Asha. Land, victory. I'll give you Sea Dragon Point and the stony shore, black earth and tall trees, and stones enough for every younger son to build a hall. We'll have the Northmen, too, as friends, to stand with us against the Iron Throne. Your choice is simple. Crown me for peace and victory, or crown my nuncle for more war and more defeat. She sheathed her dirk again. What will you have, Iron Men? Victory, shouted Roderick the Reader, his hands cupped about his mouth. Victory and Asha! Asha, Lord Baelor Blacktide echoed. Asha, Queen! So you have two lords that are in her camp who are supporting her there. And I think what you find is these folks are people who have suffered, or from in the case of the Black Tides, who have suffered from the prior wars and who see how it has really accomplished absolutely nothing. And and then in the case of Roderick the Reader, we have somebody who's educated, who knows history, who can see how long this type of the cycle of violence has gone on with very little positive to show for it. and knowing that there are diplomatic ways. Asha's saying we can be friends with the North, and they'll give us a toehold in the land, and in order to make that peace. So we can actually be friends with the Glovers, who she had taken their castle, but she's willing to give it back in order to seal that friendship going forward. Not antagony, to not be antagonistic going forward, to not have them fear. She also, later in the story, George R. R. Martin talks about peace again with her, and she has her interact with, I don't remember which Mormont it is. Is it Daisy Mormont? Whichever Mormont she meets in Stannis's army, with Stannis's army. She's a captive, and this Mormont heir is with them, and they talk about how the women of Bear Island are all fighters, and she says, "We are what you made us." Right? That's what she says, because the Iron Men have been so antagonistic, have been so violent against their neighbors on Bear Island and in the north, on the coast of Westeros, all up and down the coast, for so long, that the Shield Islands, they're the Shield Islands because they're shielding from raiders from the Iron Islands. And the idea that there could be peace and they could actually make lasting friendships is what Asha's candidacy is espousing, right? So then so they shout victory, shouted Roderick the Reader, his hands cupped about his mouth. Victory and Asha, right? And that's the message she's giving, right? And then unfortunately we transition right over to Euron, I believe, after that. So Asha's own crew took up the cry, Asha, 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 Queen. They stamped their feet and shook their fists and yelled. And as the damp hair listened in disbelief. Yes, he's so far gone. He can't even understand the concept of it. We're talking about somebody who's supposedly a religious man. He can't understand. He can't even fathom it, because he's been brought up in this culture of violence, right? She would leave her father's work undone, yet Christopher Botley was shouting for her. With many Harlaws and good brothers, red-faced Lord Merlin, more men than the priest would ever have believed. For a woman! Can you believe all these people that want to vote for a woman? Can you believe it? It's insane, right? I mean, again, I said earlier, it's not because she's a woman, that it's because of her earned it's because of the things she's done over her life, the example she set. Yes, she's not right on all the issues, and I know, believe me, there are issues that she's wrong about, right? She's not perfect, but she's definitely better than these guys, especially the ones who aren't going to get any votes and have no chance of winning. She's definitely a better choice, for the vote in this Kingsmoot. She's definitely a better choice for the vote in this Kingsmoot than any of the candidates who definitely won't get more than 10% of the vote, right? So, in this case, you've got three that we're going to get significant amounts of Victarion, Euron, and Asha, right? But in the case of, in other cases, when it's let's say a binary election, when that only one of two characters can win this Kingsmoot, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to not choose the one that's better on some issues, even if there's one issue that they're terrible on. So that's my take there. So there was one other thing I wanted to go back to with that. Roderick the Reader. Okay, so I've kind of bashed the religion of the drowned god, and I think we'll talk about the seven later on. With the election of Jon Snow, but in the northern gods then. But I wrote an essay recently. I haven't made it into a video, but I probably will. But I want to talk about a little bit more about Aeron Greyjoy and his him being so the title of my post was on my blog was the worst characters in A Song of Ice and Fire. And so I had my least favorite, and then I also made a list of from a thematic standpoint, because they don't live up to the values and generally are symbolic of the worst of the negative aspects of the themes of A Song of Ice and Fire. So Aeron Greyjoy was number one on my list for that. He claims the drowned god sent him visions and speaks to him. He claims to be a prophet. He claims that prayer gave him the divine idea to call this Kingsmoot. And he promised himself that only a godly man may sit the sea stone chair. That's from the prophet, A Feast for Crows. So that's that's the chapter he has just before this one we've been focusing on, the actual Kingsmoot. Yet when the Kingsmoot ran its course, he forgot all of that. He wussed out and he crowned Euron. When it supposedly mattered, his religious fervor was empty, or maybe he valued the religious fervor of the conquest that he saw in his vision, right? More than he valued anything that might be the tenets of this act that this religion pretends to stand for. So with that, I put him on the list of the worst characters in A Song of Ice and Fire. And I further conclude that Aeron is not even a real character, any more than the drowned god is a real god. The only evidence we have for the existence of the drowned god are Aeron's own thoughts that he claims to be sent from the drowned god. I say his own thoughts are his own. And he is just a set of eyes and a twisted mind for George R.R. Martin to use to project to us, readers, what Euron Greyjoy is up to. So he's just an aspect of Euron Greyjoy. And we saw in a lot of those passages how true that is, his misogyny, etc. And then so that's what I had to say about Aeron Greyjoy. But we know that Euron Greyjoy did win this Kingsmoot, right? And so what were the effects of that Kingsmoot? He fortunately Asha is able to flee, and she's not attacked and murdered in the aftermath. So smart on her, because he may have done that, or he may have just taken her prisoner like he did Aeron, right? So even though Aeron crowned him because he represented some possible resistance to Euron's actions, to Euron's plans, he imprisons his own brother, right? And so that's the type of character Euron Greyjoy is, right? Paranoia, just because of paranoia or being concerned about the power of another person, he goes and does that. So then he moves. Let's see. So Aeron. So we know. So then the next thing he does is he starts a war in the Reach. He goes. He attacks the Shield Islands, and he kills a bunch of people. Completely humiliates the women who were alive in the castle of the Lord there, who he's murdered, or who he's dethroned, and strips him naked right in front of us. So this is the type of person that Euron Greyjoy is, right? So he doesn't mind grabbing him by the that's the type of person that they are. This character is, and then goes on and attacks further, and now he's got a plan with the Battle of Blood to attack Old Town. And I think that George R. R. Martin is signaling that this plan will be successful in the sample chapters, and the visions Melisandre has, and all the clues we have over that. And Makoro has some visions that way too. So So I think we have evidence that the Battle of Blood is going to happen. They're going to win in the sea or the bay south of Old Town, and then take the city. So so one of the things I put in the description of this thing is that amid threats from within, without and from within, we discuss Westeros's institution. How we discuss whether the Westerosi institutions can help save the realm, and yeah, clearly the institution of the religion of the drowned god already failed us in this chapter. And if the high towers are not successful in defending Old Town, then we will lose another institution, the Citadel, the Maesters. So clearly, we know from some of the history books and other things, we know that the people of the Iron Islands care very little for the learned men of the Citadel. So the Citadel represents both the healers of the realm and the learned men, the universities, the education of the realm. So they're both educators and healers. So Euron Greyjoy does not care about education. He does not care about knowledge. He does not care about understanding history like Roger the Reader does. He doesn't want his people to be educated. He wants them to obey. He wants them to do what he wants, because he wants to run everything. He wants the power. He wants, and if he has to, he doesn't care who gets run over, who gets killed in his path. He doesn't care about other people. He cares about himself, and so he wants that power. So he hates education. He does not want anybody in the realm to have a good education. He probably hasn't had a good education himself, or didn't listen to any of the good education he had when he was young. But he cannot stand the idea. And if he wants to kill people, he clearly doesn't care about healthcare. I mean, the healthcare that the Maesters provide is, I mean, it's just protecting the weak, and the disabled, and the people that are useless mouths, right? That's what Euron Greyjoy thinks of the regular people in. So see, he doesn't want healing. Victorian has, and he's in the, unfortunately, in the same cloth there. He has the Maester in his ship thrown overboard when Makoro comes as a healer. So he doesn't respect the Citadel either. So the Citadel, it's I don't like the Citadel either, but I don't like the Citadel for other reasons. The Citadel is conspiratorial. The Citadel is also trying to play power games themselves and to thrust power in the direction they think is right, rather than just serving, like they say, oh, we serve the realm, we serve all the lords, we're here to serve. The idea that they don't have an agenda, though, is not correct. They do it. They're I believe in the Maester conspiracy. I think they did make sure that and the other thing that they represent is the media. They're the ones who get our intelligence from other places. They're the ones that all the lords lean on to get information from the other Maesters about what's going on in the realm. So they also represent intel and the media of the world. They're our messenger service. There are our AOL. AOL. There are email, right? There are the YouTube, right? They're the way we get our information in the realm. So Euron Greyjoy is attacking all three of those institutions in attacking the Citadel. He's attacking the healthcare system. He's attacking the education system. He's attacking the communication system, the media, the press, as it were. So this is the type of person that Euron Greyjoy is. So at the same time, like I said, the Citadel is not like neutral. They have their ways. I believe in the Maester conspiracy, or the Old Town conspiracy, that they're against the Targaryens. I'm not saying I'm pro Targaryen, but I'm just saying that clearly they were not. They were anti-Targaryen or forced against Targaryen rule in Westeros. I'm not taking sides that I just know it's true. So so the Maesters have been, they from that standpoint maybe they have it coming to them, but it does look like the education system, the healthcare system, and the freedom of the press are going to be taking a hit in the freedom of information is going to be taking a hit big time in the realm, and so those institutions will not be helping save the realm as we get into the winds of winter. Um, so that's not a good thing. And so I guess having said that, that is so I guess having said that, I guess I'll switch over to the other democratic institution we have, the Night's Watch. The Night's Watch, actually, everyone in the watch, everyone in the watch is able to vote. So that from that standpoint, that happens in a Storm of Swords, and trying to think of a good quote to start there. So that happens in the Storm of Swords, and it's so from that standpoint, it is truly democratic. All of the watch does get a vote. So that's one good thing. One thing that George R. R. Martin made sure to put into his fiction here is one person, one vote. Of course, it seemed like all of the people who were not present from the Shadow Tower and the other castles were being represented by their lords. So so really it wasn't that democratic. That's why they had such outsized power in the whole thing. When Sam was going to Cutter Pike and Mallister, Dennis Mallister, he was having to do that because those guys carried votes of like each the hundreds of each, let's say 100 each, at their garrisons at those two castles. So that was not truly democratic, but the concept at least was that it was democratic, one person, one vote, even if Mallister and Cotter Pike were voting for all their men, which was ridiculous. But apparently they couldn't take time to actually have letters written back and forth. It wouldn't have taken that long for a crow or for a raven to go between the castles. It could have been maybe 2 days delay, but hey, we want our results on election night, right? We can't actually wait until the votes are counted. We need our results on election night, right? I mean, to quote somebody, I'm going to have to look it up to quote this properly. To quote, no one person or political party can alter the unassailing principle that the rule of law prevails. Every vote must be counted in this election, and the will of the people, the will of people will determine the outcome, right? And so from that standpoint, obviously it's problematic, but at the same time, democracy did work there. Now, were there also shenanigans in there? Preston Jacobs makes the claim that Ghost in the Lord Mormont's Raven were, let's say, emanating hunger, and Stannis was withholding dinner from the watch and until they claimed or until they chose their next Lord Commander. So maybe there was something going on with Bloodraven trying to put the scale on for Jon Snow, or there was some magic going on between ghosts, obviously weirwood connected with the red eyes and the white fur, or the raven, which clearly has been these ravens have been clearly mouthpieces for Bran and Bloodraven in different scenes throughout the books. So maybe there was some shenanigans going on there, but the vote did happen. Jon Snow was elected. Let's dig into a few quotes on that. So Jon Snow comes in. Oh yeah. So we'll talk about propagandizing. Propaganda. I love it. As Jon walks into the hall where his what do you call it is happening, we get Sir Alistair Thorne shatters the silence. So he walks into silence. People are looking at him. Sir Alistair Thorne shattered the silence. The Turncloak graces us with his presence at last. So you talk about your political enemies not as people. It's happened before where people where candidates will try to show respect for their opponent in disagreement, and that's a strategy they have to win, is to be respectful and to show that they're a person of moral integrity and somebody who you should be uh, somebody you should be given respect and who you can trust as your leader, right? And so Alistair Thorne is supporting somebody else, not supporting Jon Snow, but he knows he's hated, so he can't run. So he's supporting Janos Slynt. And then Lord Janos Slynt. Lord Janos was red-faced and quivering. Beast, he gasped. Look, the beast that tore the life from Half-Hand. A warg walks among us, brothers. A warg. This creature is not fit to lead us. This beastling is not fit to live. So Lord Janos Slynt is a candidate for to lead the Night's Watch, and that's what he thinks of his fellow brother. That's what he thinks of. That's how he treats his fellow watchmen. He completely dehumanizes Jon Snow, and it makes it seem like he's a beast, in that it would be okay to get rid of him, to do anything like that, because he's not fit to live. And you see that, unfortunately, in one political issue right now, one war we see right now, where one side is making it out that the other side is not fit to live, and they completely talking about people as savages, and they're not democratic. They're savages. They just want blood, and that's how one side is being depicted in a war today, right? So Janos Slynt is, of course, taking a page right out of those types of people's book to dehumanize his enemy. And so it goes on. Ghost bared his teeth, but Jon put a hand on his head. My lord, he said, will you tell me what has happened here? And so that's kind of how Jon enters this election. Maester Aemond answered from the far end of the hall. Your name has been put forth as Lord Commander, Jon. So that was so absurd. Jon had to smile. By who? He said, looking for his friends. This had to be one of Pip's japes. Surely. But Pip shrugged at him, and Gren shook his head. It was Dolorous Ed who stood. By me, it's a terrible thing to do to a friend, but better you than me. Lord Janus started sputtering again. This is an outrage. We ought to hang this boy. Yes, hang him. Okay, so we're not talking about a trial. We're just talking about before we go anywhere, we want to attack our political enemies. We want to do violence against our political enemies. We do not want to. They're dehumanized. They're not fit to live. Right? Yes, hang him. I say, hang him for a turncloak and a warg, along with his friend Mance Raider, Lord Commander. I will not have it. I will not suffer it. Well, fortunately for the watch, Lord Slint, you're not the only one who gets to vote. Everyone gets to vote. Cotter Pike stood up. You won't suffer it. Might be you had those gold cloaks trained to lick your booty arse, your bloody arse. But you're wearing a black cloak now. Any brother may offer any name for our consideration. So long as the man has said his vows, Sir Dennis Malliser said. Tullett is well within his rights. So I guess they were just debating whether John could be elected, and clearly Pike and Mallister have decided that he could. And of course, John gets their votes, so a little anti-democratic there, as I mentioned, in the end. And then they're continuing to go. So Othel Yarwick has been corruptly petitioned to try to turn his votes over to Janus Slint, by who is the guy we talked about earlier? Anyway, doesn't matter. They've supposedly talked him into it from one way or another. Tried to convince him to put his weight to drop out of the race and put his weight behind Janus Slint too, because Othel Yarwick was also somebody who was a reasonable, who had a fair few votes, to possibly win this election as well. So he's coming up, but let's first. A dozen men started to talk as once, each trying to drown out the others, and before long, half the hall was shouting once more. This time it was Sir Alistair Thorne, who he's one of the ones who tried to get Yarwick to turn his votes over to John, plus to Janus Slint, sorry. And Thorne, who leapt on the table and raised his hands for quiet. Brothers, he said, this gains us naught. I say we vote. The king who has taken the king's tower has posted men at all the doors to see that we do not eat nor leave till we made a choice. So be it. We will choose and choose again, all night if need be, until we have our lord. But before we cast our tokens, I believe our first builder has something to say to us. So he's thinking, oh, I got this in the bag. I've corruptly talked this guy into doing this. He's not that smart, so we talked him into it. He's good, And so Othel Yarwick stood up slowly, frowning. The big builder rubbed his long lantern jaw and said, well, I'm pulling my name out. If you wanted me, you had 10 chances to choose me, because they've had 10 votes before. You got to get somebody who gets more than 50% of the vote to actually make a choice. So, and that's actually a good rule too. I think if we had that where you kept eliminating candidates until you got one that actually got more than 50% of the vote, that would be a better system than the Electoral College. But anyway, I digress. I'm pulling my name out. If you wanted me, you had 10 chances to choose me, and you didn't. Not enough of you anyway. I was going to say that those who were casting a token for me ought to choose Lord Janus, ... And then Sir Alistair nodded. Lord Slint is the best possible. And then he's cut off. I wasn't done, Alistair, Yarwick complained. So that's a surprise to Alistair Thorne, right? Let me get to the next paragraph, sorry. I wasn't done, Alistair, Yarwick complained. Lord Flint commanded the city's watch in King's Landing, we all know, and he was Lord of Harrenhal. He's never seen Harrenhal, Counterpike shouted out. Well, that's so, said Yarwick. Anyway, now I'm standing here. I don't recall why I thought Slint would be such a good choice. That would be sort of kicking Stannis in the mouth, and I don't see how that serves us. Might be Snow would be better. He's been longer on the wall, and he's Ben Stark's nephew, and he served the old bear as squire. Yarwick shrugged. Pick who you want, just so it's not me. He sat down. So he took his name out, and he didn't necessarily endorse Jon Snow, but he certainly unendorsed Jaina Slint. Now, was that just him finally speaking his mind, or was there, some kind of a weak-mindedness that Blood Raven or the magic we talked about at the beginning of this affected? I don't know, but propagandize certainly was something that happened to Yarwick, and he chose not to take the propaganda of Jaina Slint. So, in which we got to give him that kind of some credit there, right? So Jaina Slint had turned from red to purple, John saw, but Sir Alistair Thorne had gone pale. The East Watch man was pounding his fist on the table again, but now he was shouting for the kettle. Some of his friends took up the cry, "Kettle!" They roared as one. "Kettle, kettle, kettle!" So, and then the kettle was in. Hang on, the kettle was in the corner by the hearth, a big black pot-bellied thing with two huge handles and a heavy lid. Maester Aemond said a word to Sam and Clytus, and they went and grabbed the handles and dragged the kettle over to the table. A few of the brothers were already queuing by the token barrels as Clytus took the lid off and almost dropped it on his foot. With a raucous scream and a clap of wings, a huge raven burst out of the kettle. It flapped upward, seeking the rafters, perhaps, or a window to make its escape. But there were no rafters in the vault, nor windows either. The raven was trapped. Cawing loudly, it circled the hall once, twice, 3 times, and John heard Samuel Tarly shout, "I know that bird! That's Lord Mormont's raven!" The raven landed on the table nearest John. "Snow!" it cawed. It was an old bird, dirty and bedraggled. "Snow!" it said again. "Snow, snow, snow!" It walked to the end of the table, spread its wings again, and flew to John's shoulder. So, like I said, possibly that is Lord Bloodraven controlling the bird and putting his thumb on the scale. Possibly not. Or it's just George R. R. Martin putting his thumb on the scale and having the bird do that, right? Either way, the result is the result. And so Lord Jaina Slint sat down so heavily he made a thump. But Sir Alistair filled the vault with mocking laughter. "Sir Piggy thinks we're here all fools, brothers," he said. "He's taught the bird a little trick. They all say snow, but go up to the rookery and hear yourselves. Mormont's bird had more words than that." Which I don't know exactly how Thorne thinks that's convincing, because Mormont's bird was smarter than the other ones, like you just said. So the fact that one says snow means snow. I don't think it means it's the only word. It doesn't make any sense, right? So I don't know what he thinks there. Let's move on. So the raven cocked its head and looked at John. "Corn?" Of course, that's the thing it says all the time because it wants to be fed. But he's looking at John to be fed because he's looking at John as his leader, right? It quirked and muttered, "Kettle, kettle, kettle." So kettle corn. That's a little joke there. I don't get it. Anyway, John won. Surprise, surprise. We none of us who on this stream have read Storm of Swords, right? We didn't know that John was elected Lord Commander of the Watch. Anyway, certainly some propaganda going on there. Certainly, I think it would be a good. I actually like the aside from the fact that the commanders of the Shadow Tower and the Eastwatch got to vote for all their men. I think that that's a better election than the one we had with the Kingsmoot for its obvious failures and obvious corruption. So, um, I guess with that, unless there's somebody who actually has another chat or a question, I'm going to end this stream. So, yeah, I'd say, voting is important as I end it. You know, I will say, if we're going to end the metaphor and actually talk here, you see in the background, I have the I read banned books, and so should you, written there on my T-shirt. Um, I think one of the things at stake in this election is uh, people who run our education systems are all running. It's not just leaders. It's also judges, and it's also people who run school boards. And so do your research and find out who are the ones that are banning books, or who are standing for platforms of banning books in school boards, and please don't vote for those people. So it doesn't take long to learn who those candidates are if you do some searching online. I'm pretty sure and then same thing with the judiciary. The judiciary is so important, and when we choose our judges, they have power until to decide things that people bring to those courts, and that sometimes takes down laws, right? And so that is crucially important. In the past, I've voted for not knowing that. I've walked into the voting booth and voted for people who, I'm the Green Bard, so I have French and Irish in my heritage. So generally, there weren't people with French names who I could vote for, but there were lots of people in the judiciary that I could vote for that had Irish names for some reason. And I was just stupid enough to think that, oh, well, they're Irish. They understand the plight of downtrodden people, because that's what the Irish history here in America was. It was oppression, and in Europe, in the UK, when they had taken over Ireland and used it as a colony. The English oppressed the Irish, right? So I thought Irish people, they would be standing for the working people. They would be standing for the downtrodden. So that's why I voted for Irish people when I saw them on in judiciary roles. Well, it turned out there was this Irish person that was a judge I have voted for. One of those names I chose because she had an Irish name, and she's in the courtroom said, "I am a racist. I'm a new racist, not an old racist." For one, I don't believe her. It's an appalling thing to say, and I cannot believe that I voted for them. So that's my personal anecdote for. Make sure you go into the voting booth educated, and know what it is you're voting for. And good luck. Talk to y'all later.